T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T, here talking to you about Washington Commanders free agency and free agent targets. Guys, I would go after personally if I were a part of this Commanders front office and brass looking to add to this roster. I'm also going to give you some targets that I think they may be looking at that I don't necessarily agree with, but they may be considering as well. So those are some names to keep an eye on. But I have to start with this disclaimer. Obviously, free agency is a fluid situation, right? And teams still have the ability to come to an agreement with guys that are pending free agents. So at the time of this video, all of the players that I'm going to talk about still free agents, okay? Have not been signed back to their original teams or haven't signed a deal with another team if they've been released by their former team. So obviously you could watch this video and a player or two that's on this list could have re-signed with their former team or found a new home already, and it renders it irrelevant. But again, such is life. So now that that disclaimer is out of the way, we're talking about the interior offensive line. And this offensive line was a sieve last year, and it's really been pretty bad the last 2 years in particular. Really hasn't been any good since Brandon Sheriff left, but it's not like he was holding this offensive line together. It's been kind of failing, and bit by bit, piece by piece, you take away Morgan Moses, and then Brandon Sheriff leaves, and first it started with Trent Williams, and then it was Morgan Moses, and then it was Brandon Sheriff, and bit by bit, piece by piece, this thing fell apart, and it deteriorated to the point that we got to last year where we couldn't protect our young quarterback. So this thing has to be revamped. We've talked about the tackle position already and what they should be targeting. They're going to be aggressive, I think, in free agency at the tackle position, but also in the draft. I don't think you have to be as aggressive in either free agency or the draft at the interior positions if you go one or the other. So to me, if you go draft, then you don't have to do anything in free agency, which free agency comes first. So if you don't do anything in free agency, then you can take care of it in the draft. If you don't do anything in the draft, it's because you already took care of it in free agency. I don't think you have to do both. It's not as dire a need. You already have a guard. I think you have a center. I can't confirm that we have a center, but you spent the third round pick on a guy that played in the SEC. I'd like to see Ricky Stromberg get an opportunity to prove that he's not the starting center of the future of this team. So I think you have a center, at least one that should be given an opportunity. You have a right guard locked in Sam Cosmi. Now you fill in the rest of the gaps. You just need one starting offensive guard, and then you have guys on the roster that you can try to play musical chairs with to see where their best positions are. You got some young guys, you got some veteran guys, so let's just see what we have. I don't think you have to be super aggressive on the interior, but I do think you have to add. You're not good enough on the interior of the offensive line to do nothing, which leads me to my targets in free agency for this team on the interior of the offensive line. And we start with, if it's listed in black, it means I'm all in. Sign me up. I want this guy very badly here as a member of the Washington Commanders. And so all of the guys that I'm going to talk about for my targets are guys that I think would be perfect fits here in Washington. Jon Runyan Jr. is where I start. Former Green Bay Packer. He'll be 27 in August. This is a guy that kind of hit the ground running. Second generation NFL player. If the name sounds familiar, it should. His dad tormented us for years as the starting left tackle of the Philadelphia Eagles. Was it left tackle or right tackle? I think he was the right tackle of the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Trey Thomas was the left tackle when he was there. I think Runyan was the right tackle, if I'm not mistaken. I could have that backwards. But Jon Runyan Jr. is his offspring, and he went to Michigan, came into the league, hit the ground running, and has really been the starter for the Green Bay Packers since day one. And I like him to be a plug-and-play guard. You sign him up, you bring him in here, you drop him in at the left guard position, and you forget about it. That's how I feel about Jon Runyan Jr. We need him. We need a guy like him. I'd like to see us pursue that. If you don't do anything in free agency, as I mentioned, you can attack it in the draft. There are going to be options available there. But why need to add another thing to the long list of things that you already need heading into the draft where you can take care of it here in free agency and you have the means to do so? I don't mind spending a few bucks to help cement this offensive line as one of the strengths of this team. It's been one of the weaknesses here of late. I'd like to make it a strength all of a sudden. Guys like Jon Runyan Jr. and the next few guys that I'm going to talk about can help us turn this thing around. Speaking of which, Jonah Jackson, coming from a team that has turned it around. The Lions were just like us 3 years ago, right? And what did they do? They started from the offensive line. You know, they already had one guy on that offensive line. Two, really, if you think about their tackle out of Ohio State, their left tackle, Taylor Decker, and then they had a center already, which we might have a guard and a center, right? And coincidentally enough, their center came from the SEC from Arkansas. Our center comes from the SEC from Arkansas. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying we could turn this thing around, but they invested in guys like Penei Sewell and Jonah Jackson to help fortify that offensive line. And a guy like Jonah Jackson, I think, could be a good fit here in Washington. Physical guy in the running game, a quality pass protector. And again, I think he can come in here. You drop him in at left guard, and you keep it pushing, right? I think he could be an easy fix for Washington should they pursue him in free agency. Damen Lewis. Now, with some of these guys, their homes at their previous teams might have been on the opposite side of the line. We already have a right guard. So that could be something that you run into an issue with, asking a guy to switch positions. With Jon Runyan Jr., if I'm not mistaken, he's already playing left guard. So I think you're fine there. He might be a right guard too. But whatever the case may be, Damen Lewis is another guy that, just much like Jon Runyan Jr., he literally came into the league and boom, out of LSU, they dropped him into the starting lineup and they just left him alone. Set it and forget it, right? I think he's a physical guy, a mauler in the run game. There's some deficiencies in pass protecting here and there, but he's more than serviceable. A guy that I really, truly think is a game changer as an offensive guard. And again, add him to the list of guys that I'd be willing to spend on to get him here to Washington to help transform this offensive line. And then finally, the guy that I want the most, he's going to cost. He's going to cost a lot of money. I think he's going to be the one that gets paid the most money of all of these interior offensive linemen in free agency this period is Robert Hunt, the former Miami Dolphin guard. So let me give you some ages real quick. I think I told you Jon Runyan Jr. will be 27 in August. Jonah Jackson will be 27, or he just turned 27 in February, excuse me. So he's 27 as well. Damen Lewis will be 27 in March, and then Robert Hunt turns 28 in August. So all of them relatively young, plenty of football, good football, hopefully ahead of them. So age is not a factor. Robert Hunt is a beast. Came into the league out of Louisiana Lafayette as a guy that could play tackle or guard. You weren't sure which one he was going to. Most people thought his home would end up being guard. That's what it turned out to be for the Miami Dolphins. And boy, has he turned into and blossomed into an excellent guard in this league. He's athletic. He's physical. He can do damage in space. They've even given him the ball a couple of times. You know, almost scored a touchdown. That was one of those viral moments. Robert Hunt is a guy that I think is going to be a fantastic signing in free agency for some team. Maybe it's ours. It'd be nice if it were, but I'm not holding my breath. Just give me one of these dudes and I'm fine, right? Now, you transition to a player that they might consider. Not a guy that I'm really truly interested in, but they may consider him. And that's Mitch Morris. He was just recently released from the Buffalo Bills. Mitch Morris will be 32 in April. This is a guy who started his career with the Kansas City Chiefs by way of Missouri. Started with the Chiefs. Hell of a job for Patrick Mahomes. Alex Smith first. It's the tail end of Patrick Mahomes. He didn't win a Super Bowl in Kansas City. Then he went to Buffalo. Has been protecting Josh Allen ever since. And I think he's at the point of his career where he's chasing a chip. He's been knocking on the door for quite some time. Hasn't been able to break through. I don't think Washington is a destination for him. The only reason I even bring him up is because our O-line coach coached him in Buffalo. O-line Bobby Johnson is our offensive line coach. He coached Mitch Morris once upon a time. So there is a connection there. And I still contend that we got a guy that I want to try out at center. So I'm not looking to spend any real dollars. on a center. Mitch Morris is not a guard combo, a center guard combo guy. He's a center. And at 32, he's an old dog that's not trying to learn new tricks. I don't mind us signing a guy that can play guard or center, but I'm not looking to sign a straight center because we got a guy that I want to see if he can play center or not. Yes, you should have an insurance policy on the roster. It's not going to be a guy like Mitch Morris, I don't think, though. But again, I'm just throwing it out there. Keep an eye on Mitch Morris because of O-line Bobby Johnson. So, with that said, what says you? Leave it down in the comment section. What is an interior offensive lineman that you would look to pursue in free agency for the Commanders? And are you as interested in seeing what Ricky Stromberg can do at center, or are you like, nah, I'm good. Let's just go out and get a center. I'm not leaving it to chance. You leave that in the comment section as well. I want to see what Ricky. You spent a third round pick on a guy. I want to see what he can do. Braden Daniels. We spent a fourth round pick on him. Again, this regime was not responsible for Ricky Stromberg in the third or Braden Daniels in the fourth. So as far as they're concerned, they could care less about what either one of those guys do. I just look at it like this. If you spend a third round pick on a guy that played in the SEC, I think he should be given an opportunity. Braden Daniels, I can't vouch for him. I thought he was overdrafted to begin with, and I don't know if there's a future or not for him at tackle, guard, whatever. We'll see. But in the case of Ricky Stromberg, I want to see him get a shot. But what says you? Leave it down in the comment section. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you in the future. Leave it down in the comment section. What would you do on the interior of this offensive line? Would you say to hell with interior offensive line and free agency altogether? Just go in the draft? Or would you pursue a guy in free agency? Leave it down in the comment section. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T. Signing off. You guys have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.